Board. Marion asked me last night what this talk was called, because now we want titles for all the talks. It's called.
Well, you wanted to put them in the newsletter, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's called When Your World Falls Apart.
Never experienced that.
Oh, that's exactly.
What is that like?
Yeah, what's that like? That's the question, right? So anyway, you all know this, but a few years ago, we did a long-running course called Buddhism 101, which is kind of a combination of what are the basic teachings in Buddhism, and then how does that fit with the history of Buddhism over 2,500 years in all kinds of countries around the world, all places around the world. And I guess that really highlights the way I think about things. Like, you have these teachings, but they always happen in a time and a place and a culture, with particular people, to particular people, and that shapes what they look like and how they are presented. Just like you have Zen Buddhism, which is so Japanese in its way, or Japanese Zen, and then Vietnamese Zen a little different. How do you peel out what's Japanese and what's Buddhism? No. And yet it's very deep and pure and genuine Buddhism, presented in a way that was accessible to the people of that culture. And so it's very interesting to really explore that. And so, as you know, this is a series we're doing called Shambhala 101, which kind of takes the same view. You have these core teachings, and then they're in this social context so that we can understand them. And I think, you say, what is Shambhala? Is a good way to look at it. Is we're a Shambhala meditation center, so we're part of this network, offering and then simultaneously creating this social context in which to offer teachings based on meditation in a way that rings true and makes sense for people. I said in my notes, it's the practice of meditation and then what that teaches us of what it means to be human. And then how do we live on that basis? And how, as you know, what does meditation do? Last week, we were playing around with the aspect of it, which is becoming familiar with all the things that go on in your mind. All your thought, all your habits, all your thought patterns, and the perceptions and the opinions. And we become familiar with them so that we don't get entrapped by them. We see them, and then we say, oh, that's my thought pattern. So we've been talking a lot in the after party about how common it is to have a little self-critical voice running all the time. You're doing your thing, and then you're also talking about how you're doing it wrong. And that's just a thought habit. But we believe it until we realize, oh, that's a thought habit. And that's what meditation, that's really the gift that it gives us, is a place to be where we can see where that's happening. And then, as we've been saying, once you see you're doing it, you can make a choice. Am I believing that, or am I not believing that? And why would you do that? Why would you want to become, what's the word for unentrapped? Free, I guess. Why would you want to be liberated from that kind of cloud that shapes everything you see? It's so we can function with clarity, so we can allow our compassion, our natural compassion, to arise. And then we really can make good decisions about how to live in this world. Or another metaphor is, you're walking down the path in the jungle and you see what you think is a snake on the path, and then you jump back and run away because it's a snake and it's deadly and you're gonna die, and then at some point you realize that it wasn't a snake, it was a rope. So it totally changed your life because you reacted to this thing that wasn't real. And so our aspiration is, how can I look at something and know for sure whether it's a snake or a rope? Or know better, maybe not for sure, but better. So it's that kind of clarity, and meditation helps us by helping us know what our minds do, what our mind typically does. And then what we've been talking about from Shambhala as flowing from a set of teachings that are within the Buddhist tradition that are about a society where it's easier to be sane because practice is available and supported, and people know how to be kind to each other, cut each other a break, and they're not hungry because there's enough food and people take care of each other. And in that setting, it doesn't instantly make you be sane. It just makes it easier as a human being when the odds are for you and not against you. So Shambhala being one of those strains within Tibetan Buddhism, then our network of centers was founded by one of the many Tibetan teachers who fled from Tibet when the Chinese invaded. And he used Shambhala when he came to teach in the West as a way of giving us something, some kind of reference point for what the social context might be, could be, is for meditation. And this person was named Chogyam Trungpa. That was his Buddhist name. And I would say these days, we have a little bit tendency to downplay Chogyam Trungpa as a founder of the network because it can look like a cult of personality when you just keep saying his name over and over again, which some people can do. But honestly, he really is the inspiration for what we're doing and what we've done. Because he was this very interesting person who's, I can only think of it in image terms, but he's like a fulcrum person. He has all of those various profound meditation traditions and the secular tradition of what it means to live in alignment with the natural world. And then he's the funnel point from that ancient tradition, which is gone now really, into modern world, Europe and North America and the English language and all of the science, all the contemporary world and its challenges. He's really a fulcrum point. And a lot of the way people teach Buddhism now is very influenced by the way he taught in the 1970s. He's the one really, because he went to Oxford in the 60s, the mid-60s, as a Buddhist, and he realized, the Buddha Dharma has a lot of things about how the mind works and how cognition works, right? And how perception works and why do you think this is this, and all of that. And the most Buddhists, traditional Buddhists, look at Western religions and say, well, this has nothing to do with that. Those Westerners, they don't know anything about cognition. It's all they care about is these myths of these saviors and all of that. What Trungpa realized is right. It's not in the Western religion traditions, it's in the sciences, where we have all of that, psychology. And so now you find most Buddhist teachers will reference psychology and an understanding of ego and self-creation of ego self-esteem and all of those things, but he really was pivotal in that. And since he was so pivotal, and pivotal particularly for us, I thought I wanted to go back to where I was last week, talking about where he was, or the situation when he was a teenager. He was born in 1940, so this is the mid-50s in Tibet. So here's a teenager. He's lived in a monastery since he was age 3, taken care of by mostly men. His mother was there, she got to do a few things, but mostly men, tutors and teachers, and following a very traditional, strict protocol. I think even, beatings from tutors when he didn't memorize things correctly, and that, because that was the traditional way that you raised a young person like this. In a way, I think the expectation of people like this is that people in his position, which is as a reborn Lama from a long lineage, he's kind of supposed to lose his sense of himness. Like, I think his name is Osul, is really his first name, right? Osul Mokpo. But he's supposed to forget that his last name was Mokpo, because he's supposed to take on this persona of the rebirth of this Rinpoche. So, you gotta do a lot of things to a child to get them to buy into this, and also to get them to do the ceremonial things that you're expecting them to do, sit up on the throne and preside over the monks and the long ceremonies, and simultaneously be an authority figure, but also you're young, so that the monastery has authority figures that really are the decision makers, but you're supposed to pretend you're the decision maker. So pretty artificial social situation. That's his life as a young person, and then he's gradually learning meditation, and it becomes clear when he's young that he's going to be a keeper, right? He's a bright kid, and he's good at meditation, and he has insights, and he can write poetry and texts, and he's good at memorizing, so they're all happy he's going to be a shining star, and then lots of people will come to the monastery, and the monastery will get bigger, and more people will donate, and everything's going to be good. So that's his trajectory. And, generally the society at that time was very conservative. I was talking about this last week in the sense that this is the 1940s and 1950s in Tibet. So you have the Chinese communists, I think 48, right? They took over the Chinese government. You have the Soviet Union moving from Russia east through Central Asia. You have the British Empire leaving India, and India becoming independent, and then Pakistan breaking off. So you have all of these things happening around, but in Tibet, the senior religious leadership was kind of like, it's not happening, it's not happening, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be just like it was, and kind of hunkered down in that way. So in the mid-1950s, so let's say Trungpa Rinpoche was 15 years old, and you can really tell that the country's falling apart. And suddenly it's like, can you kind of identify with this? Here's somebody who's brought up, the only thing he's ever got any skills for and any expectations and any kind of social opportunities is to become the abbot of this monastery. and a teacher. But the whole situation's falling apart, right? The whole, the communist armies moving west, they're capturing and really plundering the monasteries that were there, the centers of learning and the colleges are being decimated, people are becoming refugees. So I just actually wanted us to pause and we'll just pause for a minute and think, okay, if you were that person, if you were him at this point, how would you be feeling? That's an actual question, so I'm actually asking you.
Frightened.
Frightened. And what else? Anything else?
Sabina, did you say something? Defeated.
Defeated. Yeah. Depressed.
Like the ground was gone. Yes.
Groundless. So it's that kind of huge uncertainty. I think maybe you might wonder, I don't know if this is like related to groundlessness, but all of this elaborate life that you've been brought up to occupy, is it valid? You know? Because it's like everybody, all these countries around you are not, they seem to be succeeding. You guys are losing, so. And I guess, Mary, you raised this question last week when we were talking about this, but like, can we relate to this?
In this country, yeah.
Yeah,
Or in the world, yeah.
yeah. Maybe, kind of. I don't think so. It's too dramatic.
Maybe if I watch a movie about it. But that's the only way.
Ah, so you don't think our situations?
I don't feel like it. Not yet.
I think it's nice that we still have some positive. So, like, I don't feel that defeated knowing that there's some positive. Whereas in that situation, I think it would have been hard to see the positive at all.
Because that feels life-threatening and this feels, yeah. I got to thinking though, for some people, I heard a story the other day about people who constructed a really interesting training program for people on the autism spectrum who would have a lot of difficulty doing a lot of things, but could really do software coding. That was something that was kind of within their capacities, and this was a training program people were really excited about that would really help people do that. Except now, software coding is done by AI. So you have constructed this whole societal mechanism to fit a world that's rapidly going away. Okay, another example today, all the Haitians that have been here on temporary visas now can't work, all their work permits are gone. So you actually have nursing homes and senior living facilities in many states where a third to a half of their workforce is Haitian. And so, as of today, they don't have anybody work there. So, it's interesting though what you're saying, Natalie, because it's like, from our perspective, this is happening globally, but, I mean, think about Tibet. But the reality here is like, well, that's happening to those people, but not to me. And I could see that because in Trungpa's autobiography, he says, well, we were getting all these refugees from Eastern Tibet and all these things were happening, but we figured we better keep on doing this college. So actually now I'm thinking what looked to me like, oh, let me put my blinders on was actually, well, it's not happening right in this, it's kind of a natural thing. It's not happening right here, so maybe we're okay. So what I wondered is, what advice would we give this terrified, groundless teenager? Or what advice would we like him to give us? Like, what do you do? This would be good for all of us to know.
To pick up on what Matali said, he apparently didn't have a lot of the positives around, so he had to, get the hell out of Dodge. But we, maybe it's not quite that bad for us, even though people are leaving the country. But,
Well, to be able to recognize what his tipping point, what the tipping point was, to say, all right, we have to leave the country now.
right.
That, that's what I don't feel personally, is that there's a tipping point yet. I see hope in the future still. And then to hear something from him as to advice is just stay the course, deliver wisdom, act compassionately, act and do the things that you need to do in order to bring goodness into the world somewhere. In my opinion, that's what I would imagine him being able to say in that situation.
It's really interesting because it's like, and I think we'll get to this too, but here you are preaching basic goodness of Buddha nature and compassion and kindness and non-violence, and people are coming and pillaging the monasteries. So it's a huge temptation. It's, I think there's an exception here. So is that kind of what you're saying? Like, how do you stay with your principles?
Right.
Well, me personally, it hasn't affected me directly, but it has an impact in the community as a whole. Because I've witnessed it, which does alarm me that right now they're knocking on their door, but they could just as easily come knocking on my door at some point in the future. Now, that doesn't compare to what they were experiencing, I don't think, in Tibet necessarily, because that was pretty dramatic. I mean, because he eventually had to flee the country. But I know some people that already have plans to leave if things continue to go in the direction that they seem to be going, rather than stay here and possibly be detained.
And then Brett says, like, your tipping point, it makes me think, Okay, hasn't there been a lot of stuff that we've taken for granted that turned out to be temporary? Which is exactly the case in Tibet, right? That we're taking for granted this whole superstructure, and it turned out that it could dissolve. I mean, we don't want to live on the edge of paranoia, right? But there has to be something in between paranoia and head in the sand. And I just wonder what that space is, because we kind of actually know, I need to know that.
Did they know where they were fleeing to? That's a planned exit.
I know they were fleeing over the Himalayas into India. And I think that was their only choice, thinking about the geography.
Did they not have Bodh Gaya as their destination?
Say what?
Did they not have Bodh Gaya as their destination?
Bodh Gaya,
Yeah.
the birthplace of the Buddha. So India is a place that would be, and was.
And that's where most of the refugees ended up anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I wrote down the question, I don't have an answer. Except that it seems like, okay, that sense of groundlessness and realizing that things you're taking for granted are impermanent. And that just being alive, that you really don't know what's going to happen from minute to minute. In a way, that's like a principal teaching in Buddhism, right? Impermanence. So, oh yeah, Pema Chodron has that book, Comfortable with Uncertainty. It's somehow not, I guess my first reaction was, well, what would you tell the person? I'd say, don't panic. And then he really couldn't panic, because in the end he had to lead, 200, 300 people over the mountains out of Tibet. He was only 19. So him panicking would have been very unhelpful. But how do you not panic, but not be so full of bravado that you do something dumb either? Aren't you glad that it's just gonna go till next week? We can find out. Except I won't be here next week. Maybe we'll
You're leaving a talk for me to give?
maybe we'll show an excerpt.
Or my grand list is at the
A video or something. Anyway, okay, so that's, since we're doing Shambhala 101, we actually do have to, because that's this founding teacher, that was his, what would you call it? His pivotal experience as a coming of age in that situation. If he'd been of the previous generation, which many of the Tibetan teachers to the West and taught were, he wouldn't have had that, they would have already been established when they came here, but here was somebody just coming of age. And just to give a preview of coming events, it was scary and awful, but at the same time, it opened up whole new lifestyle vistas for him that would not have been available if he'd been on the trajectory. Like when he came over to India, it was like, go in a monastery, don't go in a monastery. Stay a monastic, become a secular person. And so I think we talked about this in the first class, but that's what makes him particularly good to come into our situation where we see ourselves as having tons of choices. We're not bound by tradition. Anyway, thank you. So we'll do some meditation.